8. Lisette Cavaliero. After moving to New York City for an unpaid internship in 2013, Lisette Cavaliero went out of her way to maintain a certain image. She spent the next 3 years racking up credit card debt to pay for clothes, vacations, dining out, and all the other trappings of a lifestyle she couldn't afford. The young woman acted like everything was fine on social media, where she showed off her reckless purchases. Even after Lisette moved back to her hometown of Miami and started working full-time, her wanton spending continued. Not everything she bought was expensive, but she learned the hard way that even small purchases and bargain deals add up. To make matters worse, she was only making the minimum payments on the multiple credit cards she used to live wildly outside her means. By the time Lisette turned her situation around, she was $10,000 in the hole. It wasn't until she sat down and added up all her debts that she realized how out of control her spending had become. She wanted to return to New York City, which she knew would be impossible if she didn't change her habits. To make it happen, Lisette began making much higher payments on her credit cards and living much more frugally. She rented a room in the Big Apple for the unusually low price of $700 per month, while she chipped away at her bills and spent conservatively on both necessities and indulgences. Her newfound financial skills enabled her to pay off all her credit card debt in just 14 months. Lisette began using her position as an influencer to share her experience with going into debt to keep up with the pressures of social media. She now dedicates her platform to educate others on how to be responsible with money and to avoid making the same mistakes that led to her financial mess. 7. Jeffrey Hutton. Like many people who owe money to creditors, 38-year-old Jeffrey Hutton misdirected his frustrations at the debt collector who showed up at his home in Essex, England to collect payment in 2018. Tina Contello was just doing her job when she went to pick up a weekly installment that Hutton had agreed to pay as part of an arrangement to pay off his debts. When the 49-year-old mother of 3 failed to return home from work that day, her family reported her missing. One of Hutton's neighbors recognized Tina's vehicle after police released an appeal to the public for information, leading investigators to the man's house. Inside, they found the woman's brutally murdered body. Someone had stabbed her over 30 times in a clear fit of rage. Naturally, detectives turned their attention toward Hutton, who had emerged from his home covered in blood. He claimed that an unknown attacker had come inside and killed Tina, but the police didn't buy the story. Investigators accused Hutton of buying cocaine and looking at porn online just minutes after he murdered Tina and stole money out of her purse. They found his DNA on her body and the murder weapon. Hutton received a life sentence with a minimum of 30 years. While in prison, he received treatment, and they prescribed medication for mental illness. But he couldn't escape his demons and committed suicide in his prison cell just months into his sentence. 6. Eric Mosley and Sandra Cruz Lopez. 31-year-old Eric Mosley and his 39-year-old ex-girlfriend, Sandra Cruz Lopez, were both shot to death in Las Vegas on Mother's Day last year. They found Eric in his trailer, and they discovered Sandra's body several miles away inside of a burning truck. They made no arrest until several months later when police charged 24-year-old Antonio Barry Edwards and 30-year-old Jordan Monahan with kidnapping, murder, and arson. They accused the pair of forcibly taking Sandra from the trailer she shared with Mosley, making her drive to the outskirts of the city, and then firing 7 bullets into her. They shot Eric dead inside the trailer in a parking lot. Witnesses told police that the suspects may have murdered the couple over an unpaid debt that Eric owed to Barry Edwards for a stolen truck. He allegedly owed somewhere between $100 and $800 for the vehicle and hadn't ponied up. Sandra reportedly had no association with the suspects. Her murder was simply an act of retribution for her ex-boyfriend's failure to make good on his debt. 5. Anthony Knox. Ed and Pat Cobbler of Greensboro, North Carolina, thought nothing of loaning their credit card to their pastor, Reverend Anthony Knox, in 2011. After all, pastors are trustworthy people, and the Cobblers considered Knox to be one of their best friends. But it wasn't long before the charges racked up, eventually amounting to $50,000. The Cobblers have spent the last 10 years trying to get Knox to make good on his debt, which is now over $100,000 with interest and late fees. Besides the credit card charges, Knox also owes the couple $10,000 for a business investment he failed to pay back. The Cobblers took the matter to court, and Knox was a no-show 3 times. He finally showed up after they jailed him in an unrelated case of writing more than $18,000 worth of bad checks to a food vendor for expenses relating to a restaurant that he owns. By then, the case with the Cobblers had fallen into a default judgment, ordering Knox to repay the full amount that the couple claims he owes. The disgraced pastor recently owned up to his mistakes and apologized for all the problems he caused to Ed and Pat, who let money come between them and devastate their friendship. He admitted he skipped court because it had embarrassed him and didn't know how to deal with the situation. But he acknowledged that trying to sweep it under the rug only made things worse. Ed told the local station WFMY that he forgives Knox, but is unwilling to forget the debt and expects the Reverend to pay it back. 4. Jamie Patrick Mansfield. When the New Zealand government imposed a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for certain sections of the country's workforce earlier this year, a wave of protest erupted on Parliament grounds. The demonstrations continued for several weeks as violent clashes broke out between protesters and police. Meanwhile, angry anti-vaxxers set fires and vandalized their surroundings. Among those in attendance was 35-year-old influencer Jamie Patrick Mansfield, who goes by the name Jay Ratana on social media. His content, which revolves mostly around conspiracy theories, has attracted a sizable following of people who share his distrust of the government. Mansfield is a member of Convoy NZ 2022, the group that instigated the protest. Radio New Zealand recently revealed that the organization received thousands of dollars in donations over just a few days, and that the money went straight into Mansfield's bank account. The network uncovered disturbing details about his financial history that raises some serious concerns about what they have used the donations for. Mansfield has a lengthy track record of unpaid debts. He went bankrupt in 2011, only to apply for bankruptcy again the following year, and a third time in 2020. That same year, Mansfield's landlord took him to court over unpaid rent, and they awarded him nearly $2,800. Over $1,000 of it remains unpaid. When Radio New Zealand first reached out to Mansfield, he initially refused to discuss the matter. He later denied stealing any of the donations that came pouring in to help fund the group's agenda, and claimed that he even put up some of his own money toward the cause. But Mansfield got suspiciously defensive for someone who supposedly has nothing to hide. He accused a reporter of having their facts wrong and blocked them on social media. Determined to understand the matter, journalists continued to dig into the man's background. Acquaintances of Mansfield only added to the growing body of evidence that he has a majorly bad habit of being financially irresponsible and untrustworthy, making the already murky details surrounding the protest group's finances seem even shadier. 3. Citizens Energy Group versus Indianapolis Landlord. They recently hit an Indianapolis landlord with a $1.3 million lawsuit from the city's utility company over an alleged 7-figure unpaid water bill. Citizens Energy Group took action against the nonprofit JPC Charities, which owns several low-income apartment complexes throughout Indianapolis, in late February. The landlord has a history of running late on the water bill, but things escalated to a whole new level when the utility company shut off the water to 900 apartments. It was the first time Citizens Energy Group resorted to the drastic measure, which spokesperson John Considine described as a last resort. Speaking with the Indianapolis Star, Considine acknowledged the move created an unfair hardship for tenants, whose rent includes utilities. The city agreed to pay half the bill to get the water turned back on, but has clarified that it expects JPC charities to pay back the money. Local officials are familiar with the organization, with thousands of housing violations cited over the years. The nonprofit is notorious for allegedly housing its renters in deplorable slum-like apartments. Last year, the Indiana State Attorney General sued JPC Charities to force the organization to improve its properties, where residents deal with frequent fires, leaking and collapsed ceilings, broken windows, and other hazardous conditions. The lawsuit was unfortunately unsuccessful, but now that the organization's failure to keep up with its expenses is costing the city money, it's probably safe to assume that the government will hold JPC Charities accountable for its debts. 2. Nicholas Alavirdia. Nicholas Alavirdia is a self-proclaimed child advocate who used his own experiences within the foster care system to campaign for change. But he has a dark side, and these true colors came to light in 2020 when the FBI accused him of stealing the identity of his former foster mother, Sharon Lane. She had filed a complaint in Ohio against Alavirdia, alleging that he got 22 credit cards and loans in her husband's name and racking up as much as $200,000 of debt. By then, police also wanted him in Utah over sexual assault allegations dating back to 2008. Shortly after learning that he was under legal scrutiny, Alavirdia claimed doctors had diagnosed him with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The following month, news outlets reported he had died, citing his family's anonymous testimony and an obituary. But the fugitive was alive and well. He faked his death and fled to Scotland, where he lived under the name Arthur Knight to avoid being apprehended for an international arrest warrant they issued against him. It's just one of several aliases that Alavirdia has used in his attempts to weasel out of accountability for his actions. His true identity went undetected until late last year when he ended up on a ventilator in the hospital with COVID-19. Detectives identified him as Alavirdia using photographic evidence. He claimed they had made a mistake and that he wasn't who they thought he was, even after people who knew him confirmed he was the wanted felon. Alavirdia is still in Scotland. He's free on bail while authorities work to get him extradited to the U.S. so he can finally face justice. 1. Malay McLeod and Baron Chakraborty. Late last year, 27-year-old Malay McLeod loaned 8,000 rupees to a businessman in West Bengal, India, named Jain Alam Mola, so that he could buy building materials. Months passed, and Alam failed to repay McLeod. Finally, in early April, the indebted borrower contacted McLeod and said that he could finally pay back the loan. McLeod and his friend, Baron Chakraborty, went to Alam's factory to collect the promised payment. Upon their arrival, he shot them dead at point-blank range. He then decapitated the pair. Nearby residents noticed the men's bikes parked outside the factory and became suspicious about who they belonged to and why they were there. The concerned community members questioned Allah, who claimed that McLeod and Barum were inside the factory drinking. But something about the story didn't add up, so the curious locals barged into the building, where they found the two men dead on the floor in a pool of blood. The enraged civilians demanded Alam's arrest. In an act of protest against his freedom, they set fire to two of the businessmen's vehicles. Meanwhile, Alam fled, sparking a widespread manhunt. Police caught up to him in Kolkata and arrested him on suspicion of the double murder. If convicted, he faces the death sentence and they will hang him. A police spokesperson said that the suspect had a habit of taking sizable sums of money for promised construction materials and failing to deliver the products. It was customary for him to scam unsuspecting lenders and customers. Would you rather relinquish your hard-earned college degree for student loan forgiveness or spend the rest of your life in debt but working your dream job? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. See you soon.